We continue now at the top of Daf Gimel Amud Aleph from Mesechet Kesuvos. This is Kesuvos Daf 83a. The Mishnah says, "Hakosev leishto dinu devorim einli b'nechasayich." Let's say a person writes to his wife, "I'm relinquishing my rights in your property." So hareza ochel peros bechayeha v'immeisa yarsha. Still, he's going to consume the peros during her lifetime. He gets the peros, the fruits of the property, and he still inherits her if she dies. Imkein lama kasav lo dinu devorim einli b'nechasayich. If so, why did he write for her that I'm relinquishing my rights in your property? The reason he wrote it was shimcharu nesonakayim, that let's say she sells the property or she gives away the property, it's going to be a good sale, it's going to be a good transaction. And the Mishnah continues, Kasav la dinu devarim einli b'nechasayich uveperosein. Let's say he writes to her that I'm relinquishing my rights in your property and in their fruits. Hareze eino ochel peros bechayeha. So in this case, he's not going to get the fruits during her lifetime. V'yemesa yarsha, but in this case, if she dies, still he's going to inherit her. Rabbi Yehuda says, Liolam ochel pere peros. Even in this case where he gives up the peros, but he can still have the pere peros, meaning those fruits are going to be considered like the principal property, and the fruits of those fruits he's still going to receive. Unless he writes to her that I'm relinquishing my rights in your property and in their fruits and in the fruits of their fruits forever. Kasav lo dinu devarim einli b'nechasayich uveperosein uveperosein b'chayayich uvemosech. Let's say he writes to her, I'm relinquishing my rights in your property and in their fruits and in the fruits of their fruits during your lifetime and after your death. In that case, eino ochel peros b'chayah, he doesn't eat the fruits during her lifetime. V'yemesa eino yarshin, if she dies, he does not inherit her. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, in mesa yershena, that's not true. In this case, if she dies, he does inherit her. Mipnei shemasna mashakasa b'Torah, because he has made a condition against what was written in the Torah. Anyone who makes a Tanai, a condition against something that's written in the Torah, the Tanai is going to be batal, the Tanai will be nullified. Rashi over here says, when it comes to Peiros, takanta de Rabbanani, that's an institution of the Rabbanan, that's not written in the Torah, and therefore it is possible to make a Tanai with regards to the Peiros. And the Gemara says, Tani Rabbi Chia taught, Ha'omer le'ishto. He said that the case over here is that he says to his wife, Rashi over here says, Tani Rabbi Chia ha'omer le'ishto. V'lo Tani kosev. It doesn't say he wrote, like in the beginning of our mission it says ha'kosev le'ishto. Rabbi Chia taught it to be that he said to his wife, Di'ashme'inon deve'amira bi'alma nami salak nafshe below shum kinyan uchsiva. He's meaning to say that just by statement alone, so he's able to remove himself without any kind of kinyan, without having to write it down. But the Gemara continues, but when he writes this, and certainly when he says it, why is that even going to be effective? Why does it work? As Rashi over here says, certainly when he just says something, why should that be effective? But we learned in a Braisa. Let's say a person says that he's removing himself, he has no rights to this particular field, so lo amar klum, so saying that is not going to be effective at all. Rashi over here says, Omer l'chaveru kagon sada shel shutfin. For example, let's say you have a field that's owned in partnership, v'yomer ha'echad l'chaveru echad min ha'lashonos halalu, and you use any of these languages to remove your rights, bein bechsiva, bein be'amira, whether by writing, whether you just say it, lo amar klum de'in kan lashon matana. That's not considered good because there's no language of matana over here. You have to give it as a gift. It has to be like a kinyan. Just saying you remove yourself is not going to be effective, so why should it be effective in this situation? And so the Gemara answers, Amri devei Rabbi Yanai, they taught in the yeshiva of Rabbi Yanai, b'chosev la v'yoda arusa. The case over here is he wrote it to her, and it was still during the period of Erisin, during the period of betrothal. Kidur Rav Kahana, and it follows what Rav Kahana said. The Yomer Rav Kahana, because Rav Kahana said, Nachalo habo la'adam imakam acher. Let's say you have a person, an inheritance that comes to somebody, but not through the traditional route of inheritance. Adam masna aleh shelo yirshena. A person is allowed to make a tanai that he's not going to have that inheritance. And it also follows what Rava said. The Yomar Rava, because Rava says, if somebody says, I don't want this takonas chachamim that was made for my benefit, I want to remove myself from that, could go and zu, for example, this case, which we'll explain in a moment, Showman lo, we do listen to him, that is going to be effective. Rashi over here says, B'chosev lav yoda arusa, v'adai misha akarka shalo, uba litno lechavero. Obviously certainly somebody who owns a piece of property wants to give it to his friend, so tzarech lashon matana, you need to have a language of a gift. But in our Mishnah, he's writing this to her before he actually has taken any possession. And he's saying he doesn't want to have any zechus. And when they actually get married, this is during the period of Erusin again. There you don't need a language of matana, because right now he doesn't have any rishus in that property. Again, he's getting an inheritance from some other source. It's not coming from his father's. It's coming to him through some action. For example, let's say you have an inheritance of his wife. And there's an action involved. He has to marry her. Since this is through a takana of the Rabbanon, and he wants to be mochelet, that he's allowed to do, like Rav Huna says. Again, this is they made for my benefit, but he's saying it's not really a benefit, so therefore he's allowed to remove himself from this takana. And the Gemara continues, "My kigonzu." So what did Rava mean when he said kigonzu? For example, this case where the person removes himself from the takonas chachamim, kid Rav Huna amar Rav. It follows what Rav Huna said that Rav said. The Amar Rav Huna amar Rav, because Rav Huna said that Rav said yechola isha shatomer lebala eini nizonis v'eini. So that's also an example. A wife can say to her husband, "I don't want to be supported, and I don't want to produce for you. I don't want my earnings to go for you." That's a situation of rejecting a takana that was made for her benefit. She says it's not really for her benefit. Rashi over here says, "Ma'ika go and zu ahecha amra Rava," meaning what was Rava going on when he said that? Kid Rav Huna is going on Rav Huna's case. Amazonos shetiknu leisha tachas ma'asiyadeh. There was an institution, a takanas chachamim, that the woman gets mezonos, the wife gets mezonos, because in lieu of the fact that her earnings go to her husband. V'yamri yefshi v'takana zu shetiknu chacham l'tovasi shechashu l'chol anashim zimnin de lo safki l'hu mezonos b'ma'asiyadein v'tiknu lehen mezonos u'ma'asiyadein lebal. So in other words, let's say she says, "I don't want this takana. The chachamim gave it to me for my benefit because they're afraid maybe there won't be enough in my earnings for myself. But ani eini tzricha lekach. I don't need that. Mu'uneges ani v'yefshi lasos malacha. I don't want to do any malacha. Emtzali mezonos so yeshli umnas yikara. Yes, al kadei mezonosai. I'm going to find my own mezonos for myself, or I have some other profession and it makes more money. It makes beyond my mezonos, and therefore I don't want the takanas chachamim." But the Gemara continues, if so, then even when they're married, why is this true? Only by an erusin. Rashi over here says, if the reason is because it's a takana for his benefit that he doesn't want, he's able to say he's mochel. So why did Devei Rabbi Yanai, why do they have to say that we're talking about a situation of erusin? Even in a situation of nisuin, we should say the same thing. And to that, the Gemara answers, Amar Abaya says, Nesua yado ki yado, when it comes to a married situation, so there already his zechus in the property is exactly the same as hers. As Rashi says, Yodo ki yodo v'hareu keshutuf bahen. He's like a partner already. V'kevan shenechasim shalo. Once it's already considered his, tzarach lashon matana. Then you need a language of matana. Ve'in moel ba lashon dinu devarim. Then you can't use this language of dinu devarim. And the Gemara continues. Rava Amar Rava says, Yodo adifa miyada. Actually, not only is his hand equal to hers, is his zechus equal to hers, it's actually greater than hers. And the Gemara explains what's the difference between Abaye and Rava. Nafkamina l'shomeres yavam. There's a nafkamina when it comes to a shomeres yavam. Rashi over here says, Nafkamina l'shomeres yavam kalamar le'inyan dinu devarim lo pligi. What the Gemara is saying is when it comes to this language of din and devarim, that Rav and Abaye they're not arguing about. Debein yado ki yado, vein yado adifam yado, whether he has the same amount of possession as her or greater possession than her, ein moel bo lashon dinu devarim l'salko. The language of dinu devarim is not going to be effective. Upluksa d'Abaye v'Rav le'inyan shomeres yavam itzrich. When it comes to the machlokas Abaye and Rav over here of yado ki yado or yado adifam yado, it has to do with shomeres yavam. And Rashi explains uvi yavamos if ligu ba Abaye v'Rav. This is a machlokas in yavamos. The parakachole it's gavi masnisin the perek ilbo isha shomeres yavam shenaflu la nechasim the katani mesa mayasa b'chsubah. So we had a Mishnah earlier talks about a shomeres yavam and she gets property, and if she dies, what happens with her ksuba? V'if ligi beis Shammai or beis Hillel. There's a machlokas there between beis Shammai and beis Hillel in this regard. V'uki Abaye pluksayu b'shenaflu la kashi tacht of the Baal. And Abaye says the whole machlokas beis Shammai and beis Hillel is talking about when she inherits something while she's she's by the first husband, B'chaye Bala Rishon, while he's still alive. Kasavar Abaya Yado Ki Yada. And what Abaya says over there is, he's saying this idea that Yado Ki Yada, they have an equal share in the property. Lafikach Kishemes, therefore when he dies, V'nafla Lifnei Yavam, and she falls before the Yavam, V'mes, and then she dies, Ad Shelo Nisyavma, before the Yibam, Yorsheha V'yorsheh Abal Shneim Boim Lo Yarish Zem Mikoach Achoso, V'zem Mikoach Achav L'Beis Shammai. According to Beis Shammai, they both have equal strength in this property. Chaluka Adifa, therefore you divide it. Well, Beis Hillel Chazaka Kamaisa Adifa, according to Beis Hillel, no, that you go by the original Chazaka. Lafikach Nechsei Muluk B'Cheskas Yorsheh Av, therefore it goes in the Chazaka, it's considered in the Chazaka of the inheritors of the father. Upolig Rava de Abaya de Amar Ida Naflu Lakashi Tachtov. So there, that's where we have a machlokus. Rava argues on Abaya. He says, no, if she got the property while the first husband was alive, the Kuli Alma Yado Shel Baladi from Yada. There, everyone would agree it's the control of the husband that's actually greater than hers. Amar Achiv Liyavma B'Mekomo, and then the brother would take his place. V'Areu Kamos would be exactly like him. V'Yemesa Kashi Shomeres Yavam Ein Liyorshe B'Hen Klum, and if she would die, actually her inheritors would get nothing. Umasnisin de Beis Shammai, and so therefore Rava says different. Rava says no, that Mishnah over there by Beis Shammai de Naflu Lo Kashi Shomeres Yavam. It's talking about when the property comes to her when she's a Shomeres Yavam. So that's the nafkamina, whether we say Yado Ki Yada or Yado is greater than Yada. And the Gemara continues, Iboilu, they had the following question, Kanu miyadu mahu, what if you have a situation where a person is relinquishing his rights, but they also make a kinyan to that effect? Does that strengthen it? Rashi over here says, Kanu miyadu mahu a-braisa. This is going on the case of the braisa by the field. This is not going by the husband and the wife. We're going on the case of sadazu, where the person relinquishes his rights. By the case of our Mishnah, kinyan is not going to make it any more effective. Because like we just said, there you only need a statement, you don't even need a language of matana. That's enough listaluke for him to relinquish his rights. Even from the karka itself, if that's explained properly, like it says at the end of the Mishnah, if you explain that's what you're relinquishing, then it is effective. Now the reason in our Mishnah why sometimes the person eats the peiros, etc., that has nothing to do with the fact that the language of dinu devarim is not effective. That's just because he didn't explain exactly what he's relinquishing. We're going to say later on that she has the lower hand in such a situation. She can't say, well, you removed yourself from everything. No, he can say, I only meant this. Hilkach, therefore, mali kanu, mali lo kanu. Therefore, Rashi says there would be no difference in terms of our Mishnah whether the person makes a kinyan or they don't make a kinyan on the deal. Ela abraisa kaboila. We're going on the braisa. The katani lo amar klum. The time of mishum grayusa delishnu. Again, the braisa said that by the case of the field, that language is nothing because there was no language of matana, and so therefore the question is, if you make a kinyan in such a situation, does that make that language effective? And so the Gemara answers, Amar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, midinu devarim kanu miyadu. They just made a kinyan on a situation of a language of dinu devarim which is nothing, and therefore the kinyan doesn't make it any more effective. Rav Nachman Amar, but Rav Nachman says no, migufa shel karka kanu miyadu. They made a kinyan now on the karka itself, and it is going to be effective. And the Gemara continues, Amar Abaya says, Mistabra milsa de Rav Yosef. It makes sense what Rav Yosef is saying, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Pei Gimel Amud Beis.